What's up, everybody? Sam Smyers here. So I made a house edit of that Want to Love sample by Aloboi that has been going viral on TikTok, and I want to do a breakdown of how I made it. Now, before we start today, please go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe to my channel if you are not yet subscribed. Now let's just drop into a section of the song, and I am going to play from the break section, the second break, into part of the drop. This is going to be about a minute or so of the song, so you can skip through this part if you don't want to watch the whole thing. If you do want to listen to the full edits, then I'll put a link down below in the video description where you can listen to the full edit. All right, so that sounds good enough. A good section of the track to show you. Now, it is that sample, that chord progression, you probably just heard it by itself. This is how it goes, the chord progression by itself. And let me just take off all my processing by grouping together all these effects. Very rich sounding chord progression. You have these saw wave chords. Saw waves have a lot of harmonic content, so it's really filling up the whole frequency spectrum. So it's hard to add in sounds without taking away from the frequencies in this progression. So I had to do some editing to this just to try to get it to fit around when I add drums and stuff. So like, if I just turn this on, I'll add on all these things individually so you can hear what I did, because I have on a lot of things. This first one, I just wanted to give it had a bit of width to it, but I wanted to give it a bit more, just mono it a bit more. So I added on the utility plugin, right clicked, turned it into mid-side mode, and centered it more toward the mid. Then just a compressor. This is your like LA2A compressor. This is my EQing I did because I want to add in some bass. So I did some EQing, taking out the low end, and then this is just where I'm automating it, doing some automation for the drop, right before the second drop. Doing that little automation there. Then I just have another filter. I was experimenting with some of the kilohertz stuff, this ladder filter, just to cut off the top end instead of using an EQ8, because I always use an EQ8 and I just wanted to experiment, and that is this automation right here. Because the first drop I started out where it is filtered instead of really bright in the beginning. Then I just wanted to add in a bit more reverb. You can see I've got it at about 11%. So very subtle with that reverb. Then some more EQing, taking out the low end just because the original EQ wasn't doing enough. Then taking out the sides a bit, just leaving a bit more of the mono stereo field, and then increasing the sides on the top end, and then this one, I believe that should be sidechain to the hi-hats. Because I had to figure out a way to increase the, just to get the high-end stuff to cut through, because this has so much high-end frequencies in it. The chord progression, and then my endless smile. Just doing some automation with the endless smile. Then kickstart, of course, to give it the sidechain compression. Then track spacer to take out the low frequencies when I'm hitting the bass. And I could have done this with the Pro Q4, but I wanted to try out track spacer because I haven't used it in a while. And I will solo this with the bass and you can hear the difference. So let's go to the bass. And if I bypass that, versus it on, then finally wanted to cut off more of the top end because I felt like it was still a bit too bright. And when you're doing something like that, like 10K, I mean, I can't even really hear me cutting that out. Like soloed very, very little bit, but even in the track, like you can't really hear it. It just helps me get some more room out of that high end, because I do want those hi-hats to come through when it is in the drop. And then just utility plug in to do some automation. So that is the processing on that synth, the main progression, synth sound. And then during the drop, I did like chop it up and I added in these like little rhythm here, which is just, I added on a flanger and then cut off a lot of the low end. So that's most of the processing I did on that synth sound. And now let's go to, I did structure this out where I have more of like an extended edit. And during the verses, I do have like a bass sub playing these notes for just to add back in that low end that I took out from the synth, the main progression. Just to make it a cleaner sub. And that is just Serum, this dress code sub bass, this from Mal P, that is inspired by Mal P, and then just put this low cut here because that doesn't, you can't really hear anything below 20 hertz anyway. And then utility plug-in for automation, level automation. Then the bass pluck, I'll show you how I made that. I made that in Serum, and that is just a saw wave. Envelope 2 is shaped plucky, got the voicing on mono. This is my filter, MGO24 filter, got that cutoff modulation, the envelope 1 assigned to the cutoff. And then I have on this soft clip distortion, and the envelope 1 is assigned to this drive to get a bit like more drive at the beginning of the envelope, beginning of the pluck. Then after that, some EQ, low cut EQ. I don't know, I guess I didn't use this EQ8. Some compression, and then my utility plugin to take out down to the gain. That's all I did for the bass, and then I just grouped the bass together, put on some compression, and then kickstart. Which is not going to do anything on these upbeat basses because it's already like not even, there's no bass coming where the kick is, except for the sub section in the verses mainly, but there's no kick, I don't think, in the verses. So maybe I put on the kickstart just in case there is any like overlap from the end of this bass, just to make sure it's not overlapping the kick, like the release of it. But also I think I had more bass sounds, like I had some wider saws in there originally, and then I put on this kickstart, and then I ended up taking them out because I felt like it was just too much. I always feel like I add too many different bass sounds and that muddies it up a bit, and I just wanted to limit the amount of basses, so I took out those wider saws, and I think I did have this sub in the drop, but then I decided to take it out. Like I had this over here, but I decided to take it out because it felt like a bit too much. So that's probably why I had this kickstart on there, even though it's probably not doing too much right now. So that is the bass. Then the drums, I have the kick. I have this John Summit kick, which I just sampled from one of his songs. And then this kick, which I think is just from Splice, and that's just like the top layer. This is like a impact clap sound. Snare riser, I just went into the Ableton drum rack and used the 909 drum rack for the snare riser. I'm automating the EQ8, I'm automating the level, and also I have the endless smile. And that's what I used for the build-up. For that first build-up, the second build-up I have on an endless smile on the master, which is an interesting thing to do. And that's where the second break that I played you, it's like a 16-bar build-up, it's a really long build-up, and I wanted everything to come together, and I have on this smack in the face one, which almost adds in a tone that if you know endless smile, then you'll recognize the tone that I'm using. You'll like recognize it by when this intensity is going up. You can hear it almost adds in a note that's like rising up with that one. And then I also do this thing where I am lowering the master output. So this is 0 dB. You don't really want to go over 0 dB, or you're just like clipping your whole track. But what you can do as the buildup is going closer and closer to the drop, I lower it -2 dB so that when the drop comes in, you have more impact in loudness. So then all of a sudden it is a lot louder when you hit that drop. Now the other clap, the clap 909 that I use is actually just from the 909 kick kit in Ableton with a bit of EQing, and then I just used a wider clap that I found from Splice. Here's a little snare pattern there, which is that 909 snare, and then here's a reverse clap. Then I just have some hi-hats. And then during this section of the drop, I add in this hat loop, which is from my Tech House pack. And all the drums together. And then I'm doing some processing to the drums bus. I have on this glue compressor, the EQ turned on, which turns on the input EQ. So as the drums hit, all the audio from the drums hit this compressor, it's going to to turn on a low cut, and then anything after that low cut is going to then hit the compressor, which means that the kick, as the kick is hitting, it's not going to be triggering the compressor. And I'll just solo that so you can hear what I mean. And what you're hearing is what is triggering the compressor, not the kick. So if I take this off, you can see this meter going up, and you can also hear that kick sound flatten. And then after that, I did add on like some parallel compression. I'm slamming this one, and the dry and wet is at 25%. And that's all the processing I did for the drums. Now let's go through any of the other instruments. For that break, I did use some strings. So I did use the string ensemble in Contact. And all I'm doing, I'm just playing one note. A C note. And it's a bit filtered in the top end. Then I found this one that was really cool from Augmented Strings by Arturia. And this one has like it bends downward, which is like very eerie and cinematic. And together those sound like this. A bit dissonant, but really, really cool with the chord progression. And then I added another high string, which is like your classic house high string sound. And I'll play these together in a different the drop ending. And I had these beeps too going on. And that's just from this analog lab. And I just exported it to audio. And then sometimes I'll also group all the effects together, but I didn't have too many effects like risers, reverse crashes, big impacts. I only really had this lifter. It sounded more like a synth sound to me, so I just put it in the instrument bus group. And I'm always busing everything together, and you can see I'm also using markers just to mark everything, start, drop. And this one is actually the break 2. And this is like the extended ending. And let's go ahead and do this one like break 1. Just so I can like visually see where everything is. And this drop, let's go into the instrument section, the processing on the bus. I just have a glue compressor again. Looks like I didn't use this EQ8, and then this Kickstart 2, just sidechaining the instruments, but just the low end. So I have it at 100%, but I'm just sidechaining the low end just to make sure that that bass is really cutting through. Let me just loop this drop. And I'll take that off. Just to make sure that bass can really come through, because there's a lot of like low end in that synth chord progression. Now let's go on to the mastering. Now I did have my Endless Smile on the master, and I think I saw some DJ do that in a breakdown. I forget who it was. I never really thought about putting an Endless Smile on the master chain, but just to put on like everything on your whole track. But I did this time, and it sounds cool. Then I have my solid bus compressor, which I always start off my mastering by putting on a compressor. Then I'll follow that up with a soft clipper. And I like using the K-clip on the crisp mode. Then I have a Pro Q4, just adding about 1.5 dB to the middle section. I have the view on 6 dB just so I'm not adding way too much in this middle section. And then I have this Oxford inflator, and I just feel like this makes the track louder. I've seen people use this, and that's why I use it, because I just thought that it increases the loudness, but I don't know really what the difference is between using this and just slamming your limiter a bit more. So I don't always use this. I was just experimenting, putting it on, trying it out. Then I wanted to use, I was just having fun with the mastering. Like, I did a bit more than usual. I went into this AI assistant on Ozone, and then it does some recommendations for changes that you can make to your mastering, which is pretty cool. And it added a bunch of random things, but I took them all off, and I just kept the imager just to give it some width, and then this impact, which is like changing the dynamics. And what it was doing, I guess it was changing the dynamics of some of this mid-range, a lot of the mid-range stuff. So I'll A and B this. Just some subtle width, and I can actually turn all these on and off. Let's do, and then I have the Pro L2. I have the oversampling at 8, pretty high. True peak limiter, potentially super loud, style modern, and then I just increase this up, set my output to -1. And let's go ahead and add all these on one by one. It'll be really quiet without the limiter. So let's just add on the limiter first. And that is all the processing on the master. This other stuff was just more monitoring. I use Insight to monitor. This was, I just had to EQ8 on here because I was just isolating the low end, because I like to check the low end of the mix, or you could check the high end as well by changing this. I think it's a good idea to just isolate the low end, middle section, the mid range, and then the high end, and make sure they all sound good in your mix. Make sure that you get a sense of clarity, especially in the low end. And then after that, I was just doing some checking the codecs with this Ozone 11. And then, of course, I always use my span for checking the whole mix. That is the breakdown of this edit. I'll put this into this session in my Patreon. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and give it a like, and also please subscribe to my channel if you are not yet subscribed. And if you'd like to check out my stream preset packs, head on over to store.smyers.com.